All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is a talk about ProBuilder. My name is Dan Miller, work at Unity Technologies, and we are going to just kind of be freestyling in the editor. Don't have any slides prepared, just going to be telling you guys about ProBuilder, sharing some kind of resources and things like that, and then just adding to this level that we have here in the editor. So the first thing I want to start out and do is tell you where to get ProBuilder. So it's 2019. We have the 2019 version of the editor, and even in the 2018 version, we highly recommend that you get ProBuilder from the package manager. There is a version on the asset store, but it's a bit dated. The package manager is the most up-to-date version. So if you're not familiar, you can go to Window, Package Manager, and here we have ProBuilder. Now, right now I'm in 2019.3, so you can see I'm using ProBuilder 4.1.0. And from here, if you're not familiar, each package now in Unity includes documentation along with the package. So if you want to look up the documentation for ProBuilder, you can just go ahead and click View Documentation, and it goes ahead and opens up right in here. Now, this documentation for ProBuilder specifically is pretty robust. It has a lot of the different kind of options and things like that for describing some of the functionality. It even includes additional references to things like hotkeys and things like that. So let's say you're interested in kind of inserting an edge loop. You can kind of search that there, insert edge loop. It explains the functionality, has a nice visual, and then also gives you this little pro tip here for the Alt/Option+U is the hotkey for doing this. So definitely recommend checking out the documentation here. It's pretty robust and has a lot of kind of the specific features as well as the hotkeys and things like that associated with them. Now, the other resource I recommend checking out here is the World Building Forum. So this is a part of the Unity forums that kind of is what we're kind of defining as the umbrella that ProBuilder sits under. So world building being one of these, terrain is another one, and things like that. And there's a lot of different resources here. The developers are also very active on these forums. So if you run into certain issues, have a feature request, things like that, definitely check out the world building forum here on the Unity forums. All right, so now let's just go ahead and hop right into it. So I've already added ProBuilder here to my Unity editor. And now I want to basically start using ProBuilder. Before we do that, though, I'm actually just going to kind of show you guys what we have here for this scene. So I'm just going to hit the play button here and run around here. So this is a little level here. You can see there's like an elevator over there. I can run around with this character, kind of walk around. And this entire level is actually built using ProBuilder. If you've used ProBuilder before, you might recognize this kind of tileable texture here that are used for kind of measuring. Each of these squares are meters, and here's kind of the different areas here. And yeah, you can just kind of run around. There's like a cave over there as well, and we have this tower here. So just kind of a building or like a base scene that we're going to be using that has this character controller in it. Now, in order to start basically utilizing ProBuilder, and once you've added it in your project via the package manager, we now have this little menu up here that says Tools, ProBuilder, and then here we have the ProBuilder Window. Now there's also lots of different editors and tools specifically in this dropdown. So here we have the editors for things like UV, Polyshapes. We also have different kind of selection modes and things like that, materials, and a lot of the options here for ProBuilder. Now, the other area that I want to point out here, so I'm going to go ahead and open the ProBuilder window. So this now has a kind of dockable window here. You can see it also kind of resizes and does some things like that as I scale it around. Right now, you might notice that everything is in text, and this is kind of text mode. So I can right-click, and there's also icon mode. Now, I'm going to leave it in text mode or go back there in a moment, but similar type of thing. You can kind of scale this around. And here we'll go back to text mode so that you guys can kind of see what I'm clicking on. And now I'm just going to go ahead and dock this over here and kind of make it a little thinner there like that. Now, the next thing I want to point out, if you have some personal settings or things like that, or if you're interested in some of the preferences, a way that a lot of the packages work now as well is that if you go into the preferences tab here, we have obviously the general preferences just for the Unity editor, but now here at the bottom, we actually have ProBuilder specific preferences. So you can see that here. And here we have everything from things like show action notifications. So I'm actually going to turn that one on so that you guys can see some of the actions that I'm doing. I will be using a couple different hotkeys, and I'll kind of describe some of those. We also have things like certain graphics preferences and things like that. Right now we're using the Unity colors. We can also uncheck this and kind of lay out specific colors for each kind of action, selection, things like that. So there's a lot of preferences and things here specifically now for ProBuilder in the Preferences menu. Now, one last part I want to point out here in the Preferences menu is this little tiny guy up here. And this is just a kind of gear icon that allows you to reset all the preferences for ProBuilder. If you are updating ProBuilder between different projects, potentially opening it in a newer version of the editor and things like that, sometimes you might have to reset the preferences in order to get everything synced up again. So I just want to kind of point that out. But now let's go ahead and hop into the scene. So what I want to do here is I'm going to first describe a couple of these different tools and actions that we're seeing over here, describe how ProBuilder works a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of freestyle a little scene that I'm referencing from another video game. So one thing to note here also is there's lots of different kind of like tooltips and things like that when you start to hover over different objects here within the editor. So if you're ever kind of confused, what is smoothing, what is material editor, you can just leave your mouse on there for a second and you'll get some additional info. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this new shape tab up here, and I'm going to click the little plus button. And when you click the plus button on any of these options here in the ProBuilder window, that spawns an additional window that gives you additional options for that action. Now you can see here I'm in the shape tool, and so this is going to spawn a variety of different shapes. Now I'm going to do one thing here where I kind of center my view so that when I do that again, we have this cube above ground here. And what we can do, let me just grab that guy here, is this shape tool basically has a lot of pre-configured shapes and different parameters associated with them. So you can see for this cube, of course, I can kind of scale it up here. It's obviously no longer a cube, but that's kind of the base object there. And if we have this drop down, you see there's a variety of different shapes here. So we have things like a prism, stairs, and you can see that each shape here has different options. So for the stairs, we can do like increase the number of steps. We can do curvature if we want our stairs to kind of curve around. Of course, some of the height and width, things like that. And the really cool thing is that if you've kind of set up your environment correctly, and depending on what kind of character controller you have, you can kind of just create one of these shapes like this. So I just hit the build button, and that takes it out of preview mode into an actual object in my scene. And once I've done that, we have these stairs. I can just go ahead and hit play, and now I can walk up these stairs with my character. So this is kind of this rapid iteration and workflow that you can start to do, and there we go. So you can see how you can start to really prototype and lay things out really quickly, especially if you kind of set up your project. And there are different preferences on how objects are spawned, such as things like making them static, if they have a mesh collider, etc. So this obviously has a collider on it when it's spawned by default. All right, so we have some stairs there, and there's some additional options there in the shape as well. I also want to now talk about another tool here called the Polyshape. So the cool thing about this is that basically when you're kind of selecting on a certain part of the scene, it's going to go ahead and drop little vertices and allow you to create a unique shape here. So for this one, I'm going to start doing this. And here I'm just kind of clicking here on the editor, or on the ground there. Something like that. And then, whoop, so I double clicked it there, and then it turned into a shape. Now you can see there's kind of a little Z fighting. So I'm going to go back up here and use this as an opportunity to talk about this little menu right here at the top. So basically, these are your different selection modes in ProBuilder. Here on the left, we have the object mode, object selection, vertex selection, edge selection, and face selection. And again, those have some tooltips as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into object selection mode. I can select this object. You can see I'm still in the Polyshape editor mode for this Polyshape. So now I'm kind of controlling the width of it. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and hit enter, and that creates it as an object in my scene. So now that I'm in the object mode, I can go ahead and scale this up like this. And now we have kind of a unique object that isn't necessarily a predefined shape. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these stairs. And I'm going to use this actually as kind of the base object. And I'm going to start to kind of recreate this little scene in my project here. So here I've turned it on right there. So this is kind of a little plaza here from Mario Odyssey. It has kind of the Mario word there, and then we have just small little environmental details. And I'll show you how we can start to kind of lay this out, use this as kind of a reference to what we want to do. Now you might notice this kind of looks like a D, so I was going to use that, and instead of Mario, I was just going to spell Dan, since that's my name. So one thing you'll note here is that right now the pivot of this object here is kind of at the corner, and a lot of the times you really want it more either at the base or even in the center and things like that. Now, I've for certain projects and certain things like that, you can easily bring ProBuilder in just to use kind of one specific feature. And I've found that this pivot feature is a really convenient one for kind of manipulating or interacting with models or geometry that you've brought in from a maybe another DCC tool or maybe the asset store or something like that. So to show you how I can do that, I can go ahead and select the face edit mode. And one thing I forgot to talk about is that you'll notice that this ProBuilder window here, as I'm doing different modes of selection, it kind of changes what's available. So this is a context-aware menu that basically allows you to state kind of what you're selecting, and when you are selecting it, it gives you different objects specifically for that. So I'm in face mode right now, so now you see we have options like triangulate faces. I can subdivide this face, which is just going to split it into smaller parts, and things like that. So now that I've actually subdivided this face, I want to select this vertice right there. So I'm going to go to vertex mode like that. And now we can go and set the pivot like that. And now if we go back to object mode, you can see our pivot is right there at the center. So we'll take that and go ahead and rotate it up. And here we have kind of our first shape here, which is going to be the D. Now I'm going to work on this kind of pillar here with the different steps, or this kind of base thing here. So first I'm going to go ahead and start with the shape. One thing again, so as you notice when I click the shape, it's actually spawning under the floor here, so it's a little bit hard to see what's happening, but it hasn't become an object yet. Or sorry, it did become an object because I didn't hit the plus button. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete that cube. And one tip here is that if you do the mouse wheel button, or kind of the middle mouse button on your mouse, then it's going to shift the focus to where your mouse button is. And once you do that, if we go ahead and hit new shape again, now it's going to spawn right where you're looking there. So that's just kind of a Unity tip that ProBuilder can kind of link on top of. So let's get a good shape for that base there. So here I'm going to use the cylinder. And I don't want it to be that high yet, so I'm just going to kind of reduce the height a little bit, increase the radius, because we're really kind of creating the whole base here. And it's looking pretty good, but I want it to be a little bit smoother. So how do I do that? With a, whoops. All right, I hit the enter button, which created it as a shape. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete that and redo that right here. And the cool thing is that ProBuilder actually remembers what you had as your previous selection there. So it spawned this shape again. And now I'm just going to go ahead and increase the number of sides. So once I increase the number of sides, you see that the smoothness of the object is increased. So we'll do something like 40. And then I'll go ahead and build the object there. All right. And now that I've done that, you can see we kind of have this base object here. And we can start to kind of manipulate it from there. Now what I want to do to kind of create these different steps is go ahead and select all of these faces. So we can go in here and just kind of go around, and similar to a lot of your other tools, you have kind of the shift option. So I'm just holding shift and selecting all these faces here. And from there, I'm going to start to extrude them. So I'm just going to do half of it here, since we're looking at kind of the half. And notice that again, when I have faces selected, there's kind of different options here. If I'm holding the shift key and hit the up, you can see that it does the extrude, and you might have noticed that there. From there, we can kind of scale it down a little bit and put it back down to be more of a step. And then I will hit the Shift key again, and now we're kind of making these steps. So again, kind of doing some of the extrusions here to get some of the steps that we're seeing. Just like that. And I think we'll do one more. And you can see that extrude coming up because of the first kind of option that I did there in the settings menu, or the preferences. So now I'm going to go back to the object mode, kind of rotate this around to something like that. And then, of course, you can always kind of just, rescale things, make it a little bit bigger there, like that. And one thing you might want to, or you might notice here, is that, while these steps are gray, the tops of the tops here is using grass. So ProBuilder by default has a shader that allows you to do vertex colors. So what we can do here is we can actually go back to our face selection, and you see it kind of maintain the selection there. And then we can find the vertex coloring. So here you can see the vertex color option. Now, this is available for any object that has vertex coloring in its shader. And once I click this here, now we have a bunch of kind of default colors that we can go ahead and start to apply. So I can just hit apply here, maybe one a little bit darker green, and now we've added this kind of green area. And again, because I'm in ProBuilder here, because my kind of character controller is set up, we can always go and kind of test things right here in the editor. And these stairs happen to be, or these kind of extrusions that I made happen to be big enough for our character to kind of walk through there. So now let's make some of these little platforms that we see for the letters. And if I have a time, I'll go ahead and create an A and N. So again, I'll kind of do my selection here. I'll go to object mode. I'll create a new shape. And for this, I think the cube will be all right. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then from here, I'm just going to start to manipulate different parts of the cube to make it look more like that. So first thing we can do is select some edges here and kind of pull these out a little bit. Like that. And one thing I want to note is that sometimes you might notice that I try to select an edge there and it originally selected the object underneath. Because of the new prefab workflows that are available in Unity, you can actually do some clever stuff here with ProBuilder. And so let's say I wanted to edit this object completely in isolation. So what I'm going to do here is grab the cube and drag it into my assets folder. And here it's a ProBuilder cube. And now I've basically turned it into a prefab. And now I can actually isolate that here and just start manipulating the object here in the prefab view. So we can go down here, and I'll go ahead and select this face, make it a little bit smaller there. And then I'll do an extrusion in and kind of scale it down to create more of that inset that we saw. Maybe a little bit more. And now I'm kind of basically adjusting this here in isolation. I'll try to make these edges a little more even, like that. And again, similar to normal object manipulation there in Unity, at any selection, you can easily do kind of the W, E, or R hotkeys to kind of determine what type of manipulation you're doing. So I was just doing the translation there. And now I think that's pretty good. So I can just go back to my scene, and there we have the object like that. And so sometimes I've found that that's kind of easy, especially in potentially a scene with a lot of geometry and things like that. So we can go ahead and just drag this over there. And maybe scale it up a little bit. And I can go ahead and scale my D down a little bit. And now we kind of have the base of what I was going for. Let's see my alignment. All right. So that's kind of just a kind of high-level overview of what you can do in ProBuilder, how you can start to kind of utilize some tools, do some blocking out, as well as highlighting a couple of the tools here. I will say ProBuilder has a lot of different options and is a very powerful tool, especially for prototyping, getting started, and kind of putting some of these final touches or potentially adjusting some of the geometry you have in your scene. One thing I also want to kind of end with is ProBuilder also has the ability to do what we call ProBuilderize. And so if you've brought in a 3D model or an object from another application, something like Maya, or just from the asset store, you can actually ProBuilderize any model, which turns it into a ProBuilder model, giving you the options to do all of these kind of vertex, edge, face manipulation that I was doing on all these objects that we saw here. So that's kind of an option as well, if you ever get kind of an asset that you need to just modify slightly. So all right, I think that's it for my demo. We have about 5 minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions. Thanks. Yep. Say that again. Can you do a curved mesh in ProBuilder? So, sorry, you're saying, can you change the mesh? Yep. Yeah, so yeah, the question is, if I create a mesh in ProBuilder, can I change it at runtime in the game? Yes, that is available. Those are the new ProBuilder mesh APIs that actually enable it at runtime. You do have to strip off some of the code, and there is kind of certain settings that you have to do in order to enable your object to be able to do that. But that is a runtime API that we're now providing alongside of ProBuilder to do exactly that. So you can kind of create potentially a level editor or something like that. If you do want to see some kind of curved things, well, I could have, I can use the Polyshape that I have there. We also have things like the arc, which you can see there. Let me just reset this here. Whoop. And we can go back there. Whoop. And there's the arc there. And again, you can kind of adjust the number of sides to change kind of the smoothness and stuff like that. All right, I think we have time for about one or two more questions. Yep. Yep, so the question was, I'm doing all the extrusions by hand. How about precision, and can you extrude by specific numbers? The answer is yes. So what you can do here is, I can go to my face selection. I'm selecting a face here, and I can do a hotkey for an extrusion. So I can do Command E, and that extrudes it up right there at a specific amount. And you can see in the actual extrusion option here, which I need to find here because I mostly do the hotkeys, there is an option to adjust how much that extrusion amount is. It's in the red one, in the middle. Perfect, thank you. So here you see the distance is to 0.2, so that's what we just saw. So I could also set that to 1, and then it extrudes it up an entire meter there. So yeah, you can do precision extrusions, and there's additional options for the extrusion. The hotkey for that, to do a single extrude, is Command or Control E. Yep. So what was the last part of the question? Yes, yeah, so yeah, the question was kind of, is it destructive or non-destructive workflow? Can you kind of go back through? Yes, to some extent. The only kind of caveat there is the Polyshape. So basically when you create the Polyshape and then start doing extrusions on it, it turns it into a ProBuilder object. But here you can see I can undo and redo on that shape there. So, all right. Can I access the value? I don't know specifically, but I want to say yes with how we're kind of starting to open up the API and how things are being manipulated from there. But yeah, I think that's it for me. And if you guys have any more questions, I'll be hanging out around the back. Thanks.